Hello, and welcome to what was supposed to be a LinkedIn live event for a live Q&A session about ADHD in the workplace. Unfortunately, the link, which could have been user error on my part, I'm not really sure, did not work. So I decided that I did have a question or two that came in, and so I thought I'd at least cover those in a recorded session and send that all to the people that registered. And then certainly if you have questions, I would be happy to do another one of these, and hopefully I'll get the link right next time. But I wanted to at least address the questions that I got because they might be helpful for some of you as well. So I've got my tea on a Friday afternoon, so let's go ahead and get started. So, just a little bit about me. I'm Nancy Disbrow, owner and founder of Neurosity. We are a company that coaches and creates learning experiences about neurodiversity in the workplace. I also do some keynote speaking, telling my story about growing up with dyslexia and ADHD and not knowing it until I was later on in life. So I have some statements here that might sound familiar to you. Something I hear pretty often is I feel like my brain is stuck and I just can't get it moving in the right direction. Another thing I hear is that you're constantly fighting your brain, that you're always trying to play catch up and just never getting ahead. And then one thing I hear a lot from managers specifically and leaders is that they know they're kind of driving their teams crazy and they feel bad, but they don't know how to fix it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of these things today. Why are we talking about ADHD in the workplace? At least 4 to 5% of adults have ADHD. So that number is probably low, but that's at least what we know of right now. Also, Gen Z, at least 22% of Gen Z at this point identify as definitely neurodivergent, and even a larger percentage suspect that they might be neurodivergent. So that leaves us with 15 to 20% of the population overall having some neurodivergent condition in some way, which is going to greatly impact our workplace. And it's something that leaders and managers and even coworkers don't know a lot about as far as how to help, especially. So let's go ahead and jump in a little bit more here. Some common challenges. This is from the Attitude magazine, common challenges in the workplace and just in general with ADHD. You can see obviously distractibility is really high. Managing your time can be really challenging and just a lack of organization altogether. But some of the things that we don't talk about as much are impulsivity, social challenges. Trying to maintain friendships can be really challenging for those of us with ADHD. It takes a lot of executive functioning to respond to people in a timely manner, to schedule things, and then, quite frankly, just to have the energy to do it after we've maintained a work week, it can be a lot. So, the other part is that high energy. So, some people have really high energy and have trouble controlling it. Other people really struggle with the energy side because they've used up so much of that energy and battery power, as I like to describe it in my trainings, throughout the week. They tend to have almost a lack of energy by the end of the week. So, what are some of the signs? A lot of times I get questions from people. They're saying like, "Hey, I want to help out my coworkers that have ADHD, but I don't want to ask them, and I don't know if they would even know if I did ask them, but what are some of the signs that I can look for?" So let's cover those just quickly. Difficulty organizing work. So a lot of times people with ADHD will organize in piles. So there'll be kind of a messy office space, but then they'll have piles of things everywhere on the floor, on their desk, on a couch, wherever it is. They'll have lots of piles. And for some reason, our brains like to categorize things in different piles. Unfortunately, if we don't see it, it doesn't usually exist. So it's not necessarily a really good strategy for us to use, but that could be a sign. Um, Trouble tuning out distractions. So if you see someone who is easily engaged in another conversation, or can get distracted and join a different train of thought very easily, that's one of the most common, and something I think most people would correlate to ADHD. Running late can be for a few different reasons. So many times people with ADHD will get into a hyper focus mode and they'll actually tune out a lot of the outside world and almost not realize that their calendar is dinging and that they have another meeting to go to. And so they could be late. Also, people with ADHD tend to overcommit and underestimate how much time it takes them to complete a project. So, that one last email they want to write before they run to that next meeting could be just enough where now they're late and then it progressively kind of compounds on top of each other throughout the day. Procrastinating on projects, not because they don't want to do it, but because they don't know how to get started, which we'll cover in a question here in just a minute. Interrupting or talking over people. e- as adults, we do obviously we get a little bit better at this for the most part because it's just not socially acceptable to interrupt people all the time. However, you will see people with ADHD, they just get so excited sometimes and they have such a good idea and they don't want to lose it out of their brain that they may blurt out something that is, out of turn and they're not waiting an appropriate amount of time before saying it in a meeting or just in normal conversation. Playing with objects and fidgeting, obviously, this is pretty typical, especially if you think of, children with ADHD and they're always moving or tapping their legs or, playing with their hair, fidgeting with pencils, whatever it is. So that can certainly be a sign. However, it does not have to be. There's a lot of fidgeting that people do in a masking type of way that might be like tapping their toes inside their shoes that you don't see. Um, Doodling on paper is something that looks a little bit more, kind of common and culturally acceptable in meetings, but that can be a sign of fidgeting as well. And then somebody taking frequent breaks, moving around a lot, even taking a phone call and pacing back and forth while they're on the phone. Uh, those constant movements, our brains tend to do better if we're in some type of motion, even if it's just the doodling or pacing. That little bit of repetitious motion is really helpful for our brains, and so we just kind of do it naturally. So those are some signs to look out for. Now, I think it's important to say just because you do these things does not mean you have ADHD. Certainly, we all do these things to some extent, right? We all get distracted or we all join in a conversation when we know we probably should be working. The difference being is that when ADHD is impacting your life and making it hard for you to do the things you know you need to do. Right. So there is a difference. And I don't necessarily want people to get overly worried about doing some of these things every once in a while. The definition of ADHD is when it impacts more than one area of your life. So if it's impacting your social life or your work, schooling, your relationships at home, if it's any more than one situation and in one area of your life, then that's when we start to get concerned and look at it a little bit closer. Okay, so here is a question that I got this week when I put out the live post. My purchasing manager waits until the last minute to complete projects. He has great ideas, but he's stressed and overwhelmed most of the time. I'm worried about him and I don't think I'm seeing his best work. What can I do to help him? So, one, I love that this manager is worried and compassionate about trying to help this person. I think that that's so important. But also, what can this manager do? So, I think that anytime that we're coaching people, we really need to make sure that we're highlighting their strengths as well, especially people that are neurodivergent. They tend to get corrected more in school and throughout life, and so that sense of "I failed again" can come so much quicker than with other people. So, here are some positives that you can look for when you're looking for strengths within a person with ADHD or potential ADHD in the workplace. And so just picking out one or two of these to really highlight in that conversation is really important. And this manager actually did, in the comment itself, he said he's got really great ideas and he's great at what he does. He just waits too long and then he doesn't have time to produce his best work. So focusing on that creativity piece is going to be important in that conversation. But what we can also do from a more strategic and tactical perspective is help that manager really break down that bigger project and take one as an example and break it down into a few smaller tasks and action items, right? Which is good. I think that's pretty intuitive that we could help in that way. But there's a few other things that are ADHD specific. So we also want to make sure that timeline and those smaller action items have deadlines that also are on a whiteboard, so they're very visual. So people with ADHD tend to, if we can't see it, it doesn't exist. And so we have to have it either on a whiteboard or a piece of paper or something that we can visually scan and check in on while we're doing other work, and may potentially get distracted by an email, but that will help us kind of refocus back on what we need. Also, on that action plan that's visible, we need to identify at least the first step, maybe the first couple of steps within each of those sections. So even a smaller framework of what to do for that piece of the project, putting action items will really help that person get started and it won't ruminate so much on, okay, but this is still something that I don't know how to do to get started, right? So if and this works individually as well. So if you know you struggle with taking on a big project and you've tried to divide it up, but it's still not working, obviously make sure you have it physically in front of you and that somewhere that you see throughout the day, but also write down or have somebody help you if needed, write down the 2 or 3 action steps that you need to start on each one of those pieces. This even goes for to-do lists as well. To-do lists aren't bad, but sometimes we write them too vague, right? We're like, pay the bills. Which bills do we need to pay? I need to pay the water bill on the first of the month and it's $250, right? That type of detail, or I need to send an email to this person about and write it out, right? We need more information in our heads just to get going, and then it won't be such a barrier to get started. So I hope this helps. I would love to hear back from the person that sent this to me, if possible, just to see if that helped at all. I do want to just highlight real quick. I spoke a little bit about the coaching that I do. I'm launching a group coaching program specifically for professionals in the workplace soon. We're building a wait list right now, but that will most likely come out in June and kick off in June. And so if you're interested in that, please let me know. It'll be 6 weeks, but it'll be really a dynamic kind of learning experience, as well as just a ton of practical information that you'll be able to implement. There'll also be some additional resources and more individual one-on-one sessions too. So it'll be a fun way to kind of get started, and you're going to learn so much about your brain and how and why it works the way it does. And I just think that is so powerful. So here's my contact information. If you need to get a hold of me, please, I'd love it if you follow me on social media. Shoot me an email if you have a question. I will try to do another live and not mess up the link next time. But if you have any questions in the meantime, please let me know and I'd be happy to help.